thought process of just flipping those projects, because the Travis County area is not on 1826. There's no new developments there. There's the homes that are there are already going to be there. There's not any new developments where we're having all the development our way, and that's where most of the traffic is anyway. So just flip those projects and take the bottleneck away, and it'll open everything up.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Appreciate it. All right, next we have Bill Brock. And let me...
Hey, everybody. I'm Bill Brock. I'm the chair of the coalition. We got formed about 3 years ago. We are a coalition of 10 POAs and 3 churches up down that part of the county. And we have solid support for what we're trying to do. As Randy says, it doesn't really make sense now to develop the Travis County portion first. I mean, we understand that TxDOT, when they build out a road, they start from a major road and then sort of go from there incrementally. What we're asking them and you to do is, imagine this right here is 290, and then there's this section of the road in Travis County, and over here is a section of road in Hayes County. We're asking you all to swap those. That's not how TxDOT usually works, but we've already had more feasibility studies, and TxDOT has already done more work on expanding our section of the road. So it just makes sense. Currently, under the 2045 plan, our road is supposed to be developed out in 2035. We're concerned that that's going to get pushed back even further in the 2050 plan. And on the other hand, Travis County is supposed to be, at least currently under the 2045 plan, to be start construction starting in only 2 years. That'll probably get pushed back some too. So the whole point is that we are under extreme traffic pressure now. It would be much better for everybody concerned if our section got developed sooner than the Travis County section. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brock. Appreciate it. All right. Before we move on, I want to welcome some of our newest members. We've got, I think, 3 new folks from the city of Austin here, new one from Burnett County. Let's see, I'm looking around. So we have Zoe Quadri, let's see, I'm coming around, Crystal Lane, Mike Siegel, and then we have Commissioner Dockery from Burnett County. So welcome everybody that is new today, and Ashby will answer all your questions. So let's see, we'll move on. We don't have anything for item number 3. Item number 4, report from the TAC.
I'll cover that. Yeah, so in our January TAC meeting, we had 3 information items. This included discussion and update on the 2026-2029 project call, going over basically the process of that, things like readiness and things like that. Following that, we had a presentation on the draft 2050 Regional Transportation Plan by our staff and consultant team. That same presentation is on the agenda today. And then the third item was an update on our Regional Safety Action Plan, again by our staff and consultant team, and that same presentation is on the agenda today. That's all we have. To take any questions.
Any questions of Chad? All right, no questions. Thank you, Chad. Appreciate it. We will move on to item number 5, which is take action on the minutes from the December 9th meeting. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Mayor Houston, second by Commissioner Inglesby. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. So item number 6 is an appointment to the CAP Metro Board. Just by way of background, if you all remember, CAMPO has 3 appointees to the CAP Metro Board. One that has to have at least 10-plus years in finance background. That's Matt over here fills that seat. And then the second one is somebody that has 10-plus years in a business background. Diane Bangle is that appointee. And then there is another one that is, has to be an elected official from from one of the entities in the service area. So that could be City of Austin, it could be Leander. It has historically and traditionally been the City of Austin. And I think, Zoe, you drew that straw. You can decide whether it was the short or the long straw, but so I will entertain a motion to appoint for item number 6.
So moved, Madam Chair.
All right, and who are you moving to appoint? Go ahead.
So contrary.
Okay.
That's true. I could have said somebody else.
Yeah, all right, so there's a motion, and I'll second that.
So only the
Oh, that's right. The only people that can vote are people that represent the service area. So that would be Leander, Williamson County, Austin, and Travis County votes. So, so all those in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously of those eligible to vote. And y'all will make note of that in the minutes, right? Thank you.
Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to add the clarification that I'm not able to vote in my seat, but that I would have the proxy for Judge Brown. So
Right.
my vote was for him.
So thank you. Please note
the
that in the
proxy.
minutes. All right, and I guess Matt welcomed him, so. All right, item number 7, discuss and take appropriate action on the call for projects update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've got sort of 2 items embedded into this item. The first is related to the ongoing project call that we have for federal transportation alternative funding and the carbon reduction program funding. Both funding categories are part of the current federal IIJA bill. And so on the project call, we initiated that call a few months ago, actually last fall, and we have been working as staff to, one, determine readiness of those projects, but also we are about to begin the process to start scoring those projects so that we could make a recommendation back to this body about allocation of funding. As part of the President's recent list of executive orders, the carbon reduction program has been suspended. We are awaiting clarification from Federal Highway Administration on whether or not that program will move forward or if it will be modified in some way. But as of today, we have been informed by the Texas Division of the Federal Highway Administration's office that they will not process the forms that would be required to be approved that would have to be done in order for us to get reimbursement of those funds. So for those of you that are new to the CAMPO board, the way the federally highway program works is it's a reimbursable program. You spend the money up front and then you submit a reimbursement for eligible activities. In order to get the reimbursement, Federal Highways has to first approve on the front end before you start billing on the project. You have to get their approval up front that it's an eligible activity. They have not provided the approval for those funds, so we are not able to submit. So,
quick question. Was that right
yes,
here?
I'm sorry.
Mayor Pro Tem. You said you received notification today?
No, it was last week.
You received, and is that included in the backup? Were you notified
No,
via letter or via
it was verbal.
verbal?
But the program that was affected was listed in the executive order.
So Ashby, I think it's important to point out, though, we have been trying for over 2 years to get this approval. This is not something new. I mean, it was 2 years,
Prior.
right?
Yeah, and I was going to
Okay.
address that as well. So the other part of this, in addition to the call for projects that we're under, back in 2017, 2018, this body, actually, no, I'm sorry, it was 2020. Three, thank you. This body awarded $4 million in carbon reduction funds for us CAMPO staff to administer a regional travel demand management program. So, Mayor Delisle, you remember we talked about school pool, and you've used some of that in Leander. That was part of the program that we've been doing. But we have been waiting for Federal Highway Administration to also approve the forms for that. 2 years we've been waiting. They have not approved the form. So every week for the last 2 years, Ryan has emailed and or called Federal Highway Administration to ask about the status of the approval, and we have been stalled for 2 years. We don't know why. But I don't want anybody to think that we're being singled out, because to my knowledge, no other MPO in the state was approved either.
I called them also, and they
Yep.
said
Yes.
they're going to get it next week.
Yes, and thank you for that. I also had a conversation with the head of the Texas office in October, and I thought we had this worked out, and then nothing. And Ryan has resent the information at the request of Federal Highways at least 6 times over the last 2 years, and so we are stuck. I don't want to give the impression that somehow the executive order somehow all of a sudden shut this off. We've been asking for 2 years prior to the.
So it's cross administration.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's.
We don't know why.
And isn't that just one of the projects or types of funding
It-
that now the executive order is saying is on hold?
That's the one yes, there's also one related to electric vehicle charging called NEVI. That one's been placed on hold as well, and there are others, but I still need to get through all the executive orders so I can see. But those are the two that affect us that we know about. Going back to the call for projects, the current call for projects underway, we have not scored the projects that were submitted under the carbon reduction program funding, and we're asking y'all to tell us, either give us instructions or if you want to take a vote. What we're asking is to pause that portion of the current call, and what we would do is, if we get some clarification on that soon, we would then come back to this body, ask to restart the process, and then we would go ahead and score those projects, and we would ask for updates in costs, because more than likely the cost will have gone up again, and then we would bring that recommendation forward to this body. The other thing we could also do, if you choose to pause that portion of the call, is we will have a call for projects using federal surface transportation block grant funding that will start this fall. Everything that was submitted under the carbon reduction program is also eligible under that program. So the applicants could resubmit again in the fall under the other program. And that program has not been touched by the executive orders.
So Ashby, to your point, if you said that during this pause, we allow for you time to get more information, or you get it soon would be before the fall, is
Yes.
what you're saying.
Correct.
Yeah.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
so listening to what's going on with the courts earlier today, we understand that the administration has been instructed by the courts that they will continue to fund all of the projects that have been approved, including the Infrastructure Act, until higher courts take a position. So I don't know that there would be any reason to pause the analysis. At the end of the day, it is not the actual work on the project that would be paused. It would be planning for the work that is going to be done. Am I wrong about that? We don't want to stop planning. It's not like we've got shovels in the ground now.
Correct.
So it seems to me that we should continue planning until we're told that there won't be funding for the projects, because we understand that all of the projects that have been funded under a couple primary acts, one being the Infrastructure Act, at this point shall continue as planned.
Okay.
I think it would be important to get a clarification on what funded means, because we haven't awarded these. And so that's where, the kind of the gray area is, are they saying, because the money's out there, but technically we haven't encumbered it because we haven't awarded anything. So that, I think it would be important, because, Ashby and I talked about this, there's a lot of staff time that goes into these reviews, and if it's paused, so I don't know how quickly we can get a clarification on whether that's encumbered means keep going forward, or, and I think there's a lot of gray area right now that everybody's just trying to kind of figure out. But I don't know how, maybe we could do a tentative.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I would say the exception to that would be the travel demand management program that we've been waiting on for 2 years, that y'all have.
Right, and that we've tried to encumber, we just couldn't get them to sign off on it. Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Trevilian. I agree. Colleagues, I don't see a reason for us to pause what we're doing, especially since there are changes that are happening quite a bit with the new administration. I would hate for us to take a pause on these projects, because then we'd be asking staff to resubmit unnecessarily so when it's a little premature for us to make any changes at this time. So my recommendation would be that we continue as planned until there is actual written notice and confirmation that there are any changes to these programs and funding.
So, Madam Chair, could I? Yeah. So, we're going to follow the instructions that y'all give us, but just so you know, the reason I'm asking for the pause is between staff time and then the consultant, I'm going to have to pay a consultant to also help with this. I would be spending money that I don't know where we're headed. That's the reason I'm asking for it.
So the timing on this program is our timing, not necessarily, we've got, so perhaps we could put a pause on for a month and get clarification, find out to the extent that we can, come back at the next meeting and say, okay, this is what encumbered means, this is what can go forward, what can't. And then that gives us a little bit more clarity. We're not spending dollars on a consultant if we take that month to sort of try to get a little bit more clarity. Is that your hand raised, Mayor?
Yes. Yes, I understand staff time and not wanting to put that towards something that's not going to be rewarded. But my question is, what else do we have going on? Because if something does break through, is it not going to be intense on the staff at that point in time? It's either now or later. I hope there's a later. I agree with not paying a consultant. Is it required that we have be paying the consultant to work at the same time that our staff is working?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Then my suggestion would be to look at what the staff resources are, and as much as we can put towards this, that'd be great, and hope that we land in a good place.
Okay.
Just to clarify, so then it would be these projects would continue, but we're not paying for a consultant? Or can you clarify what?
Well, that's just one suggestion. It's not, so that's Mayor Houston's suggestion. Any other?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. I'm in agreement with Mayor Pro Tem Fuentes on kind of her vision of this. My question, though, is what is the cost of paying the consultant, right, if we continue onwards, like Mayor Pro Tem said, versus taking a pause and then having to play catch up? Are we potentially going to end up spending more money doing that versus if we just kind of continue right now?
So I don't have a dollar figure for you, but what I can say is whether we pay them now or we wait till later, the cost should not change because that's baked into the contract that their rates are already agreed to in the contract we have.
So if staff continues to move forward, but we don't expend any consultant dollars at this point, can you give us, and with Tim and others, do some additional research and figure out what going forward really means on, okay.
I think that's the best. I think it's the best of both worlds, is to, realistically speaking, what Commissioner Trevilian said is that we'll get more clarification from the judiciary on this, giving it a month and making sure that staff pushes forward on this, and while realistically speaking, get us what a time frame and a cost for what a consulting would look like. I think that That's fair.
I think it'd also be helpful to have a month, just if certainly to understand what the court's going to be ruling. Obviously, things are moving very fast. But also, I'd like a chance to consult with our staff and just kind of understand how that trickles down to the various city staffs, and are they creating work that they would just have to recreate at some point in the future?
Okay. Mayor?
Are we meeting in March?
No, ma'am, it'll be April, unless y'all tell me otherwise.
No, I'm not suggesting that we meet when we're not planning, but we're talking about a month, so it's really 2 to report back.
But staff can still proceed, though.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
And we
Commissioner.
can also send out a memo in lieu of the board meeting
Sure,
for
yeah.
March, so you can be informed.
Commissioner?
Could we clarify the work we're talking about is like scoring the projects that have come in? And so even if they don't get to apply for that, if they're going to use their applications for a different
For different category funding.
It would be a benefit to the region to have that scoring process and get feedback, so we have the strongest projects, I think.
Okay.
Any other comments? So do you feel like you've got direction?
I do. Did Ed have a?
Okay. All right, so staff is going to continue to work towards scoring. We're not going to expend consultant dollars, and we will get updates on the stop-start of federal funding. Okay. Is that the only one you needed on that one?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. Item number 8. Tim, this is you. This is with new board members. Our esteemed council provides a refresher on our code of conduct for the board members. Mr. Tuggy.
Thank you, Chair Long. Every year at the beginning of our first meeting, we typically call your attention to your code of conduct, which is in your packet. I'm not going to read it today, but just call your attention to the major headings, first of which calls for awareness and compliance with our bylaws and our Joint Powers Act. I invite you especially to look at our Joint Powers Act, which is the document that created the MPO and governs its ongoing existence. Of course, the bylaws are your operating sort of SOP. Other provisions in the Code of Conduct relate to the expected attendance and preparation for our meetings, the duty of confidentiality within the law, and the same laws of conflict of interest that apply in your respective jurisdictions apply in this body as well. Our operations in meetings are governed by Robert's rules, and the chair's authority is final with respect to ordinary operations subject to points of order in the ordinary course. There's a very important provision that was pretty hotly debated, frankly, when the code was adopted on Section 5 under staff relations. And in particular, I call your attention to the item that limits individual board member access and utilization of staff up to 8 hours per year for individual requests. Anything beyond that time limit requires approval by the policy board in general. So these, the code is available in your packet at pages 22 through 24. And as always, you can contact me with any questions.
Thank you, Tim. Does anybody have any questions?
So Tim, you're just saying, do your job.
You bet.
All right, there we go.
Yeah.
Go Eagles.
Oh, whoa. Can we strike that from the record?
We were 26 minutes into the meeting before anybody mentioned the Super Bowl. So.
Leave it to your lawyer.
Did that not violate our policies for conduct? Just check.
Well, Chair Long, I have
Our vice chair does it routinely when he comes in with his Longhorn attire. Whoa. So.
That's a point of order.
Yeah. When you beat South Carolina, you can crow a little bit over here, okay?
Chair Long, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Per 5B, and I'm not arguing or saying one's right or wrong, but this says to perform any work that requires more than 8 hours of accumulated staff time. I believe you said per year. I'm not arguing that that's a good idea, but it doesn't say that in here. It actually just says 8 hours. I would read that as per request. That's a lot.
We have typically interpreted it to mean per year by an individual board member, but that's subject to your decision ultimately.
Yeah, I think
The board sets policy.
if for those who've been on the board for a while, there was some inordinate amount of requests by certain entities and certain members, basically wearing staff out. And so the board as a whole put that together, because there's certain things that should happen in your own jurisdiction, and then there's certain things that CAMPO handles. And so that was sort of put in as a safeguard, just to preserve staff time, that it doesn't get consumed by one individual member.
Yeah, I would think that it would be 8 hours per time that they requested something, is the way I would read it.
I think
I'm not opposed to the per year, but it really doesn't say. And so if we want it to be specific, I think we should define and alter them.
Well, we can bring that back to clarify. The current item is only a discussion item, it's not an action item, so we can bring that back to clarify. All right, any other questions on? All right, seeing none, we will move on to item number 9.
Good afternoon. I'm Will Liska, Regional Planning Manager for CAMPO. This is an information item on the Draft 2050 Regional Transportation Plan, also known as the RTP. The Draft 2050 RTP document was sent with the presentation slides for your review. Previous presentations to the board on the RTP have included a summary of the purpose and timeline of the RTP, an overview of the call for projects process and the projects received through that process, and a review of the revenue estimation methodology used to calculate the fiscal limit that the plan must adhere to. Over the past few months, CAMPO and its consultants have been reaching out to project sponsors that submitted projects for the 2050 RTP to coordinate on the fiscally constrained project list. Through that process, agency staff already have been briefed on the projects that appear in the draft 2050 RTP for their respective agency, both constrained and illustrative. Following those conversations, today we'll do a high-level overview of the plan contents, project list, and how board members and the public can provide feedback. First, I'll provide a quick orientation on the chapter-by-chapter content of the RTP. The chapters cover the purpose and goals of the plan, regional trends and needs, the fiscal constraint methodology and the calculations used for that, development of the fiscally constrained project list, travel demand model results, a summary of the public involvement process, which is still in process, and a section on how federally required performance measures are incorporated into the long-range planning process, and a list of policies from previous regional planning efforts. Next, I'll touch on the goals and objectives of the 2050 RTP. These goals and objectives were established by the Transportation Policy Board for the 2050 RTP, and for the 2050 RTP includes some minor language updates to follow guidelines and requirements from the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act. These goals and objectives were used for the project call process to evaluate submitted projects for the prioritization of fiscal constraint through state and federal funding sources. Moving on to the trends and needs section of the RTP. This covers a variety of topics that impact regional transportation, including demographics, that by 2050, population is expected to double to 4.7 million and employment doubles to about 2.2 million. The emerging technology section considers trends, benefits, and challenges for things like connected and autonomous vehicles, public transit, goods movement, remote work, and big data. The system performance review describes the federally mandated congestion management process and the existing multimodal transportation network. Environmental considerations, this section includes an approach to using Title VI in the planning process, air quality tracking, and the nexus of public health. Safety considerations, this looks at regional traffic crash trends and issues. And finally, there's the unconstrained needs section. This section summarizes the findings of the completed regional plans and studies that came before the 2050 RTP, including CAMPO's Regional Active Transportation Plan, the Regional Travel Demand Management Plan, and the Regional Freight Plan. I'll now turn things over to Allison Flewitt, who's with CAMPO's consultant, Kimley Horn, to discuss the fiscal constraint component of the plan and the project prioritization process.
Thank you, Will. Can you all hear me? Better now?
There you go.
There it is. There it is. All right. Thank you all. So moving on to the next slide, as Will mentioned, I did want to recap with you some of the process that we went through to arrive at our fiscally constrained project list. And we have had the opportunity to present on elements of this fiscally constrained project list to this body before. This does consist of our project call, as well as the scoring of our project applications, arriving at our prioritized project list, comparing those against our forecasted revenues, to ultimately arrive at our fiscal constraint determination and our list of constrained and illustrative projects. But we'll get into a little bit more detail going into our anticipated revenues by horizon year band on the next slide. So when we look at those horizon year bands, we have this broken out actually on this slide into 3 different categories, looking at our federal and state revenues, our local revenues, and our transit revenues. We're looking at, over the course of our planning horizon, approximately $19.5 billion in federal and state revenues estimated, over $22 billion in local capital revenues, and $15 billion in transit capital revenues. And these are all for capital dollars only. I do want to note specifically for our transit revenues that these are fully accounted based on either existing or planned future services within either Cap Metro, CTRMA, or ATP. Moving on into our overview of our fiscal constraint determination. We first received our project applications from local agencies through our project call process. And we were able to score those project applications and then determine our prioritized project list using a set of priorities that had been developed and then vetted through this board, as well as our technical group as well. At the same time, we were forecasting our revenues to determine that fiscal limit, which is essentially what we believe can be reasonably constrained by our 2050 horizon year of our planning process. We then compare those priorities, our prioritized projects, to those available revenues to ultimately determine our constrained versus illustrative project lists. So something that's helpful to understand within the context of this is what we actually received during that project call process. We actually received over 1,000 projects in our project call that came from 27 different jurisdictions and agencies, including TxDOT. Over 60% of those were roadway projects. Something unique about our roadway projects is that some of them do also include active transportation elements as part of the roadway project itself. In addition, we had 12% of our projects were transit projects, approximately 22% were active transportation projects, and we also had 2% of our projects that were transportation demand management, ITS, or other project types. Arriving at our fiscal constraint, we were able to think about details such as projects that were already having funding committed through our TIP. Also, projects that were submitted as locally funded. Those projects may have been already designated by their submitters as intentions for 100% local funding moving forward. I will note for projects that were submitted as being 100% locally funded that those were not brought through the prioritization process. Anything that was considered as 100% locally funded, if a sponsor in the future did want to actually have that considered as a candidate for federal and state funding, that would need to be brought back to CAMPO staff so that that could be fully brought through the prioritization process and then considered at a later date through that scoring process. But once we had that project list essentially brought through for our committed projects and local funded projects, we ranked those remaining projects for our funding prioritization based on the scores that had come through our prioritization. From here, I'm going to turn it back over to Will to tell us a little bit more about our constrained project lists.
Thank you, Allison. I'm going to provide a brief overview of the financially constrained project maps for each project type. A link to an interactive map showing both constrained and illustrative projects has been provided in the background materials, which we'll discuss in a moment. And a full list of the constrained and illustrative projects is in Appendix A of the draft plan. Roadway projects, we have 326 financially constrained roadway projects, with about a third constrained via federal funding and 2/3 through local funding sources. You'll notice a high density of projects in western and central Williamson County, eastern Travis County, and Hayes County surrounding I-35 and connecting I-35 communities to US 290. These projects vary in scope and include safety or multimodal improvements, added capacity, and new location roadways. Projects in Burnett, Bastrop, and Caldwell County are primarily improvements to existing TxDOT facilities, though some new roadway connections are also on the list. Moving into transit projects, we have 108 financially constrained transit projects. In addition to the Phase 1 light rail and new frequent bus services in central Austin, you'll notice planned express bus routes connecting both smaller cities to the central part of the region, as well as routes connecting smaller cities to each other. The list also includes pickup services in lots of smaller communities, as well as new and upgraded transit centers and park and ride lots. Next, active transportation. We have 146 financially constrained active transportation projects. The majority of these were submitted by and are within the City of Austin and include complete streets, safety improvements, and urban trails projects. But we also have active projects from other jurisdictions, including Georgetown, Leander, Cedar Park, Travis County, City of Bastrop, Buda, and San Marcos. ITS studies and other projects. We have a handful of ITS studies and other classified projects spread throughout the region. Just as to define other projects, those are those that don't fit one of the other project categories, and both of the ones shown on this map are from discretionary grant awards. I also want to note that several projects that appear on the project list were not necessarily tied to a geographical location and did not have a GIS file provided, so these do not appear on the maps, but they are in the project list. An example would be a project that's programmatic in nature with improvement locations not yet determined, such as a project to improve a certain number of traffic signals or to look at traffic signal improvements citywide. As I mentioned, CAMPO has created an online map viewer to supplement the project listings in the draft plan. This map viewer can be accessed from the following link or from the link in the agenda backup materials. The web map has tabs for both constrained and illustrative projects, and the layers on these maps can be turned on and off by project type. If you click on a given project, it will provide you the same information that appears for that project in the draft plan. I'm now going to turn the presentation back to Allison Flewitt to discuss travel model results and the Title VI analysis.
Thank you, Will. We had the opportunity to use the regional travel demand model as a tool to better understand some of the outcomes of our financially constrained project list. We wanted to hit some of those highlights here, as well as a couple of key takeaways beyond what we see in the slide. And more information is also provided within our RTP document itself. Now, some of the key takeaways here were that with our projected growth that is expected, that you heard earlier from Will, travel demand in this region is expected to more than double to 22 million person trips per day by 2050. We also know that with this increase in population, if we were to not look at that fiscally constrained build scenario, we would expect worsening travel congestion to increase to more than twice the current levels within the region. So one of the good things that we saw is that when compared to our no-build scenario, the identified improvements in our build scenario actually represent a reduction of more than 28 million vehicle miles of travel per day compared to that no-build scenario. And one of the things that I think is helpful to kind of give us an apples-to-apples comparison here is thinking about the vehicle miles traveled per person. So when we think about our no-build, we're actually looking at an increase of that vehicle miles traveled per person of 20% compared to what we have today and what we're seeing in that no-build condition in the future. Now, if we think about our build congestion into the future, we're actually looking at that as the same levels approximately as what we experience right now. Our vehicle miles traveled per person would be approximately the same right now as they would be in that 2050 build condition. So what that really means for us is that the average person does not need to travel any further for their day-to-day activities in that 2050 build condition than what they would in our current existing conditions, which is great news for us. It essentially means that those projects that we have identified are doing what they're supposed to do. They are mitigating the impact of congestion within our region. So we're excited to see that outcome for our area. Moving on to our Title VI analysis, we did look at Title VI to consider our protected classes and did an analysis to assess our compliance with Title VI. A couple key takeaways here. The big one that we need to focus on is that our build scenario has no disparate impacts on Title VI protected classes. We also did an additional analysis looking at vulnerable populations. So those are defined within our area as low-income populations, seniors, persons with disabilities, zero-car households, and persons with limited English proficiency. When looking again at that comparison, we did not see any disparate impacts with our vulnerable populations during that build condition. We get into a little bit more detail here on this slide, essentially looking at trip lengths and travel times, both by vehicle and by transit. And what we see for those vulnerable populations is that we're seeing actually slightly shorter trip lengths and travel times by vehicle compared with the general population as a whole. And by transit, vulnerable populations experience a roughly equivalent walk length and slightly shorter walk time compared to the overall population. And vulnerable populations experience a slightly shorter transit length and time in 2020 and a slightly longer transit length and time in 2050. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Joyce to talk more about our public engagement efforts.
Thank you, Allison. So the second phase of the public participation, can y'all hear
Joyce,
me?
I don't know that we can hear you.
Is that better? Okay, great. The second phase of public participation will start later this week, and in keeping with the public participation plan, for the new members to the board, the public participation plan is the document that guides how we conduct public outreach programs. So the PPP outlines 60 days in 2 phases. The first 60-day comment period took place this fall. The second comment period that will run 60 days will start later this week and run through April. This board will have their public hearing at the April board meeting, and prior to that meeting, we'll also have a public open house in this location. So the outreach methods will include an online open house, and the map viewer that Will mentioned will be included on that online open house. We'll have in-person events and open houses. Right now, we are scheduled for 2 events in each of the 6 counties. Travis County will have 3 events, including the one that will take place prior to the board meeting in April. We'll also, Vice Chair, have mail and phone commenting, so people that would like to have information and participate by mail can call in and request that. We will send the postage paid envelope to return the surveys. Like I mentioned, public events in all 6 counties and that public hearing in April. Prior to the board considering adoption in May, the board will receive all of the public comments and survey results that we receive in this second round. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Will to talk about next steps.
Joyce, real quick before you leave that, just for our new members, our public involvement process has actually been recognized as being very robust, and we've always sort of gone above and beyond in that process. So just for the new folks, just to let you know that Joyce and team and really the whole CAMPO staff has really upped the game there. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Joyce. I'm just going to walk through next steps, the timeline for plan adoption, and Joyce covered a lot of this already in covering the public outreach, but that second round of public outreach is going to open this week, run through April. I'm requesting that comments from both the TAC and the board be sent to me by March 14th. My email address is there on the screen. And the reason why I'm setting this deadline is because we are visiting with the TAC on March 24th to discuss the final plan for information. Following that, we will be visiting with the board for information on April 14th. We will be seeking a recommendation from the TAC on April 28th on that final plan. And finally, we'll be visiting with the board on May 12th for an action, essentially plan adoption. And with that, I am happy to open things for questions.
Thanks, Will. Does anyone have any questions of Will or the process? Yes.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair, for recognizing me. My first meeting here, so thank you for the presentation, William. I guess a little guidance, if you could give us, what's most useful in terms of providing feedback by the March 14th deadline? Like, can you give me some recommendations about how you'd like to see that?
The draft plan was sent to both staff on the TAC as well as board members. Any specific comments that you might have on the plan content, that would be very helpful. You know, we could have the opportunity to sit down and talk through comments as well prior to March 14th, but I would just request that those meetings be set up in advance of March 14th.
All right, thank you for the update. Appreciate it. And all the, I mean, that was a 10 or so minute update that is the high-level summary of the hours and hours and hours of time that you all have spent. So thank you, and thanks to our consultant as well. Appreciate it. All right, let's move on now to item number 10.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the board. The purpose of this item is to provide an update on the progress of the Regional Safety Action Plan, also known as the RSAP or RSAP, and more specifically today, an update on the county-level safety action plans and the work we've undertaken with our county safety task forces. So for the new members and those who may have not seen the RSAP information back in November, this planning effort is supported by a US DOT Safe Streets and Roads for All planning grant. That was awarded to CAMPO in fiscal year 2022. Our goal is to develop a region-wide safety action plan built from county-level safety plans in coordination with county safety task forces. Travis County was also awarded their own safety planning grant, so CAMPO staff are managing the plans for the other 5 counties, and the results of the Travis County effort will be rolled into the regional plan after the county's adoption. The plan will focus on data-driven safety improvements and policies that jurisdictions in the region can use to seek implementation funding from SS4A, HSIP, and other sources. We have prioritized a bottom-up approach to this effort. As such, we've been working with local planners, engineers, law enforcement, stakeholders to ensure that we're accurately identifying the safety needs and countermeasures that will be most impactful to the reducing fatalities and serious injuries from our roadways. Our team is now at the point of developing ideas on how to best meet the safety needs that a hotspot analysis and high injury network identification have brought to our consideration. We've been working with county safety task forces to make sure that the issues and potential countermeasures meet with their experience in the field. We've also been beginning to identify policy and programmatic recommendations, some of which we hope to address the greater need for greater enforcement and behavioral strategies. We plan to begin a second round of public outreach starting this Friday, February 14th until March 14th, which will present to the public locations of safety concerns and potential improvements for those safety issues. A similar set of project ideas has been included in your background material, and feedback you have on those locations, the countermeasures, will be greatly appreciated. The county planning efforts will be finalized in the spring, and a regional plan will be formalized to the beginning of the summer. I'm now going to introduce Deputy Project Manager of our consultant team, Hussam Gandour, to briefly summarize the county-level safety analysis and how we've begun developing recommendations for infrastructure improvements based on the identified safety needs. Hussam.
Thank you, Nick. So I will be going through our safety analysis process for the RSAP project. We framed the safety analysis based on the emphasis areas as they are defined in the Texas Strategic Highway Safety Plan, also known as the SHSP. These emphasis areas were identified because they constituted a high proportion of fatal and serious injury crashes. And the table you see on this slide shows an example from the Williamson County summary safety statistics. We have similar summaries for all other counties. So our analysis showed, for example, that 42% of all fatal and serious injury crashes have occurred under dark conditions in the 5-year period from 2019 to 2023. Other key emphasis areas that were identified include intersection-related crashes, roadway and lane departure, speed-related, amongst others. Due to limited funding available for addressing safety needs, safety practices have often focused on locations where there are overrepresentation of crashes. And for the RSAP project, we've developed a high injury network to identify and highlight those high-risk locations. So the map you see on this slide shows an example from Bastrop County, where the intersections make up about 3% of all the intersections in Bastrop County, but account for 64% of all intersection-related fatal and serious injury crashes. So it's highly overrepresented. By analyzing those locations, we've looked at the key emphasis areas and crash contributing factors for each location to help us recommend targeted solutions, such as infrastructure projects, such as signal timing adjustments, enhanced signage, as well as other behavioral strategies, such as additional enforcement and education. Next slide. So this is another example of a high injury network. This time is, instead of intersections, it's 4 segments. It's also from Bastrop County. And to just illustrate why this was the high injury network, it was what you see, the roads in orange constitute about 8% of the roadway miles in Bastrop County, but resulted in about 63% of all segment-related fatal and serious injury crashes in the county. Next slide, yeah. Our approach to recommending safety projects focused on 2 considerations. First, we've analyzed locations with high crash frequency and severity from the high injury networks that you saw in the few slides before that. By reviewing those crash patterns and contributing factors for each emphasis area, we looked at countermeasures that would be both flexible for implementation and capable of delivering high impact for crash reduction, addressing both behavioral strategies as well as infrastructure-related strategies. So second, we also engage directly with the county task force members through one-on-one meetings to review and refine the countermeasures recommendations. They provided opportunity for local input, ensuring that the proposed countermeasures align with the on-the-ground needs and local priorities. Additionally, we collaborated and we continue to collaborate with our task force members to establish and assign weights to the prioritization criteria for the infrastructure projects, considering criteria such as the crash reduction potential and cost estimates.
Real quick, could you define for the public so they better understand, when they see crash reduction potential, what does that mean?
So that would mean, like, if, let's say, you've recommended rumble strips on a roadway, what would be the expected crash reductions if this countermeasure is installed? Is it 10%? There are studies that show what percentage would be reduced of certain crash types if installed. So let's say if it's 10%, so you multiply that 10% by the total number of historical crashes in that 5-year period, and there are also estimates for what are the crash costs. So like a fatal injury could be equivalent to $4 million. So when you calculate the expected crash reduction as a benefit, you can multiply that by the dollar value and then get a total benefit of that solution. Any other questions on this one? So yeah, for behavioral strategies, we focused on key emphasis areas where driver behavior may have contributed to the crash occurrence. Those would include impaired driving, speeding-related crashes, or distracted driving, and also seatbelt usage. Also, we looked at the high-risk locations where behavioral attributes may have occurred, such as like intersection locations or work zone and school zones. We've also analyzed crash patterns for vulnerable road users, including pedestrians and bicyclists. And to address those issues, we've identified targeted strategies such as high visibility law enforcement and public education efforts, aiming to improve awareness and safer behaviors across all road users. And we are currently in the process of reviewing the behavioral project list with the task force members as we finalize this list in the next few weeks. Next slide. So for infrastructure-related improvements, we've analyzed high crash locations from the high injury network to identify areas where targeted infrastructure treatments could help prevent the crashes. The map you see on this slide is from Caldwell County as an example. It shows the locations where we've recommended countermeasures to treat the key safety concerns across those locations. In the next few slides, Nick will go through a few examples of some of our recommended countermeasures and how they aim to improve the roadway safety on those areas.
Thank you, Hussam. As Hussam has shown, there are many proven countermeasures that can address specific safety needs, and we hope to engage with the public on how these ideas will meet with their own realities. For example, dark conditions or lack of lighting is a significant issue through much of our region, but especially in rural or newly developing areas. In denser areas where lane departure or head-on or ankle crashes are more prevalent, installing medians or consolidating driveways may be more appropriate. Intersections are a particular focus for many safety planning efforts, and this is where adding a left or a right turning lane or improving signal timing or just redesigning the intersection may prove to be the most beneficial in reducing crashes. Finally, cyclists and pedestrians are often the most vulnerable along our roadways and will often suffer the worst fate in the event of a crash. Dedicated active transportation facilities, improved crosswalks and lighting, and leading pedestrian intervals can help make sure that we reduce these types of crashes that sadly make up an overrepresentative share of fatal and serious injury crashes in our region. So to summarize, we are preparing to present these initial ideas to the public in a second round of outreach that starts this Friday. That feedback will help finalize our county-level safety action plans. And as we finalize those plans, we are beginning work on the regional safety analysis and a policy assessment in the early spring. Thank you for your time. Please let me know if you have any questions, concerns, and I want to thank you for letting us present on this item today.
Thank you, Nick. Are there any questions of Nick? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, appreciate it. Let's see, on to item number 11. Nirav, I think that's you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a discussion on federal performance measure targets. This is an item that this board sees every year. It's one of those things that we have to do, mandated by Congress if we want to get things like our transportation improvement program approved. So what is transportation performance management? It is a system that was mandated by Congress in legislation passed in 2012 and 2016 that basically said that we have to use our existing data sets to find out whether the decisions and investments that we're making, do they contribute towards the achievement of national goals? How does CAMPO implement this system? We have a variety of ways. In the 4 bullet points at the bottom, we do performance-based project selection criteria, which we heard about earlier today. And then you heard about the different planning products, including our TIP, our plan, and planning studies that we do. And we also set regional targets, which we are here to discuss today. So how are these regional or goals set in the first place? In the left, the column there shows performance measure goal areas that are set by Congress. And then the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration, they create goals for each of those performance measure areas and performance measures. It is then up to the state DOTs, transit agencies, and MPOs to create the targets and then plans and programs on how those targets are achieved. One thing to note is that every year, TxDOT creates statewide targets, which for reasons mainly due to cost and resource limitations, every MPO in the state adopts TxDOT's targets, including us. Basically, the amount of work it would take is just simply beyond the capacity of this and any other MPO in the state, so we always choose to adopt TxDOT's targets. So what are these targets? There are 25 performance measures across 5 different categories. In the column on the left, under the category, what you'll see is the individual performance name target, and then on the right, with the numbers, are the actual goal. The numbers in the parentheses were last year's goals. And what you will see is that pretty much across the board, those goals have stayed the same from the previous year. So in short, again, these are the goals that TxDOT adopts every year, and the MPOs across the state always adopt those goals. Finally, I'm sure that slide was exciting, but we have a more dynamic way of showing this data on our website through a series of dashboards. We try to show, exactly how these performance measures look in a more dynamic fashion and how we compare against them every year. So that is my presentation. We will come back to the next meeting from the board to get approval on this item. But that's it. Thank you for your time, and look forward to any questions.
Nirav, thank you. And don't sell yourself short. The dashboard has been the subject of many conversations at this meeting, and it's a great tool. If you haven't looked at it, especially the new folks, go out and look at it.
I never sell myself short, ma'am.
Amen.
Oh, goodness.
Madam
Any questions of...
Madam Chair, if I could.
Yes, Commissioner.
I understand that we use TxDOT's measures, and I understand why. I'm wondering, beyond the dashboard, what do we do to isolate and identify how the work that we do as a region compares to other regions, but also gives us the information that we need for actionable recommendations to you?
So we do compare how we compare against the targets. We have not done that of how we compare against other regions, and that's definitely something we should consider.
At least more urban regions. Yeah. I'd be interested to see how we compare to DFW, Houston, San Antonio.
Yes, absolutely. We can definitely look into that. That shouldn't be too marginally difficult.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Any other questions? All right. Good job. Thank you. And that brings us to our last presentation of the day. And this is on the Texas Smart Track Initiative. You want to tee this up, Ashby?
Mike normally doesn't need much help.
Okay. I was trying to give you the benefit of the doubt. But.
Well, I think everybody kind of teed it up for us in that we've been talking about safety.
You want to introduce yourself real quick?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Mike Ariano. I'm the Deputy District Engineer for the Austin District. And so let me figure this out first. All right. Never get an engineer a clicker. So everybody's been kind of teeing it up for me. How many of you heard about Texas Smart Track or know about it? Okay, so most of us. So good. So this is kind of a great update on where we're at, and I got some great news. But for those of you who don't know, like any transportation project, our primary goals, like we've just been talking about for the last hour, are safety, congestion, mobility, and nobody's talked about money. $1.3 trillion lost due to fatal crashes in this country. And so these are our primary goals, but the good news is we've been designing roadways safer than they've ever been. We've been designing vehicles safer than they've ever been, but yet we still don't see a great decrease in that number up there. If you're not familiar with that, there was 316 fatalities in Central Texas last year, a little bit lower than last year, but not nearly the decrease that we want to see, correct? So transportation technology, in my opinion, and many, many others, is that golden ticket to get to zero fatalities. There's been studies that show that there's an estimated 90% reduction in fatalities if we fully implement these type of technologies. Ironically, that correlates to the 92% percent that NHTSA responds to or has studied that are the root cause of most fatal crashes are driver error. So if we're not addressing the major opportunity to reduce fatalities, we're kind of missing it. And so, but is transportation technology really that linchpin? It is. And so here's some proof. This is a fresh study from the National Safety Council. They just studied in recent safety features in our cars have reduced the severity of our crashes, but just by having those added technologies in our cars. So I'm sure lots of you have little bells and whistles and things ringing at you now that you're out of your lane. The good news is that's working. We can take it to another level. So congestion, we don't talk about that often. The more automated vehicles we have in the roadway, start thinking of density per lane. So we talk about adding lanes, we need to add lanes, but we need to optimize the amount of vehicles we put in a lane, whether present or future. And technology allows us to do that. In the future, we'll be able to visualize all these type of things in our onboard systems like we talked about. We're trying to improve the driver experience, not just for the people in the car, but people in our traffic management center. I'm proud to say that Austin District has been using AI in our traffic management center for the last 2 years, and we've seen significant improvements in responding to crashes and potentially reducing our secondary crashes by almost 30%. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Amit, and he's really going to tell you the nuts and bolts of what Texas Smart Track is.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amit Bhasin. I'm the director for the Center for Transportation Research at the University of Texas at Austin. And just to continue on the same idea that Mike just talked about, vehicles are a lot safer today than they've ever been, and they're going to continue to get safer all the way until they become fully autonomous, all the way that autonomous vehicles have full market penetration, which is a long time from now, but it's going to happen. But along the same lines, if you think about the same technologies that are inside your vehicles, and you think in terms of transportation technologies, if you take those same benefits and apply them on the infrastructure and make the infrastructure safer alongside as these safety improvements are happening with the vehicles, I think you can more than double the benefit that you get from these technologies. And we're talking about computing, AI, machine vision, and things of that nature. And the fact of the matter is, over the last decade, computing power has become so much cheaper, so much more efficient, that some of these things that were really out there are now a lot more affordable and a lot more easy to implement. So here are some examples. I mean, these are not this is not an exhaustive list. It's just a taste of things that could be done. So in the picture to the left, like some of the use cases we are looking at are vulnerable road user detection, applying these in school zones, looking at school buses, when there's a high density of pedestrians crossing these areas, eco-driving, cameras that are equipped on intersections can detect school buses, can detect freight vehicles, and they can you can program these things to make small adjustments in the traffic lights that will allow the congestion to ease up a little bit, reduce the braking and hard braking in vehicles, heavy vehicles, and so forth. So again, and some of these benefits in computing are not just for dense urban intersections. They can also be applied to rural areas, hitting animals on a blind spotted area, and things of that nature. So the use cases are really, we could go to spend a whole afternoon talking about all the use cases and ways in which this can help transportation sector. So again, we're glad that we are able to take small steps into this world with the help of TxDOT and City of Austin. We were recently able to install some of this at an intersection near Burnett and Breaker. At that intersection now has edge computing to it. It has cameras, machine vision, and we're able to look at pedestrians, traffic, and things of that nature, and give real-time warnings and information. And even signal phase and timing information that can also help autonomous vehicles improve their safety. All right, here are some of the challenges and potential solutions, and this is where I think Smart Track comes in. There's a lot of words here, but I'll try to reduce this to 3 main ideas. The first idea is that anecdotes are not data. There's a lot of technology out there, a lot of vendors, a lot of products, gadgets, gizmos, and software tools. And each one of them will claim that this is the next best thing, this is the solution, this is going to improve safety. And there is some truth to that. But just isolated ideas and isolated anecdotes do not make data. As transportation agencies, we have to be very cognizant of the taxpayer dollars and figure out that if we subscribe to a certain piece of hardware or software or technology, what is the taxpayer's ROI on this? How much safety are we improving? How much congestion are we reducing? How many accidents are we reducing? So there is a need to collect real-world data by deploying these technologies in a controlled environment. The second thing I want to highlight is potential benefits are not the same as actual benefits. You can take each one of these scenarios and say, yes, this is how we can save energy, this is how we can save time, this is how we can relieve congestion, reduce accidents, and so forth. But until we get out there, deploy, and measure, we won't know exactly how much impact we are having on all of these performance measures. And last, most importantly, is just because something, technology exists and it's technologically feasible, doesn't mean that it is execution, is ready for execution, it's prime time ready. Just in this one experience that we had working with the city and TxDOT at that one intersection, installing edge computers, we found out so many issues, so many challenges. How do you specify this? How do you control this? How do you make sure it's not vulnerable to cybersecurity attacks? How do you make sure that the data doesn't have false positives and false negatives? How do you make sure that it works properly at night and day when the bird is sitting on top of the camera, things of that nature, right? So, and not just that, like how do you put all of this in a specification, in a toolbox that can be used by agencies and scaled and deployed? And that is, I think, a very important part of all of this process. So just one intersection has given us a lot of experience on how we can actually spec and scale these technologies and deploy them for future. So again, just going back to the context of Texas Smart Track, we envision this as a 3-tier system. Tier 1 is a closed course test facility. Tier 1 is a closed course test facility. This is at our J.J. Pickle Research Campus, and this is meant for edge case testing. If I want to really deliberately try to hack into a system, this is where I would do it. I wouldn't install something at a traffic light at Burnett and Baker and try to hack into that while it's operating a real-life traffic camera. And so this is a closed course facility, again, intended for edge case testing. Tier 2 is our J.J. Pickle Research Campus, things that we are a little bit more comfortable with, things that need a little bit of adjustment, adjustment of signal controllers, software, hardware compatibility. If we need to make little tweaks in the system, this is a small, if you've been to our J.J. Pickle Research Campus, it's like a rural environment over there. It's a very low traffic, but we do have buses, we do have bicyclists, we do have pedestrians, we do have cars, but it gives us a very limited small control environment to make small adjustments. And then Tier 3 is where we have partnered with CAMPO and its members in some of the cities and TxDOT to actually pick roadways where we can deploy this technology, but deploy it from the point of view of not just installing something, pushing a button and going back, but studying it, collecting data for at least 1 or 2 years after the fact, seeing how well the system performs, and seeing and understanding whether or not we need to make small adjustments, building specifications and making blueprints so that other cities, other agencies can take those ideas and create their own deployments based on their use cases. So that's the idea with the Tier 1, 2, 3 Smart Track, and we've made some progress right now with that one intersection, and we look forward to continuing to grow that idea in the future. Mike?
So just to conclude, just some updates. So that Tier 1 circle track you've seen, TxDOT has committed to construct that also, not only is it looking at technology, but its impact on our infrastructure. So these are going to be test sections and see how it impacts the hard infrastructure. So that's a bit of an update. But just wanted to conclude, as Amit said, I mean, I'm sure several in your staff are being approached by a number of vendors and consultants who think they have everything figured out. One thing I can conclude and update you is nobody's figured it out. And so this is a great unbiased way to judge exactly what has worked, but not just worked on an individual basis. We're trying to create a system approach that our whole region can be plugged into, so that way you can take plans, specifications, standards off the shelf at Texas Smart Track and apply it in your city, your county, or on a state system that's consistent with everybody else. Because that's the other thing is everybody's offering these, unique solutions, but they may not be compatible with each other. And that's what we're finding out in these type of intersection projects. So we're trying to take a systematic approach that everybody can benefit and greatly reduces the cost and the number of vendors and consultants that you have to pay to figure out it didn't work together. Yeah, that's about where we're at today. So any questions on all that?
Thank you, Mike. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Appreciate both of you giving
We're going
us
to give a little handout afterwards you want to see some more about.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to the Executive Director's Report. Ashby?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a whole lot to go through today. I will tell you I am sort of in the process of thinking what my priorities are going to be for this year. One of the things I have been concerned about for the last 10 and a half years, and I'm more concerned about, is wildfire evacuation. So I have tried for a few years now to get the state to start thinking about wildfire evacuation routes. Currently, they do not designate wildfire evacuation routes. They designate hurricane evacuation routes. And as all of you know, we've got two areas that are prone to wildfires in our region, Bastrop County and then Western Travis. In both cases, we do not have adequate ways to get people out of those areas in the event of a wildfire and to get personnel and material in to fight those wildfires while they're going. So I am going to start initiating some conversations with TxDOT Planning and Programming Division about looking at routes because they do the quarter designations there. But I'm also going to start sitting down with others, organizations, and starting to have conversations about what we can do to either improve existing routes that we have or perhaps even look at routes that do not exist today to get folks in and out of wildfire-prone areas.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
If we may, I think that that is a very important process that we need to dedicate more time to. Travis County, through Commissioner Shea's office and through Commissioner Howard's office, have really worked with communities and set up planning events where we make sure they know how to communicate, who to communicate with, that we look at that we look at routes that are available, and that we work together as a team. And we've been working with our ESDs as well. So I think that a significant amount of work has been done over the last 2 to 3 years, if I'm not mistaken, and we would certainly be willing to share what we have learned and the processes that they have put in place. And I commend my colleague and Commissioner Shea have been award-winning processes at NACO. So let's talk about how we can work together.
Along the lines of what you're saying, commissioners, I know quite literally you're saying the last 2 or 3 years. I'd say the ESDs, I remember having a report on this like almost a decade ago. And I think people pay attention to Bastrop because they've seen what happened in Bastrop, but most people don't know about Western Travis. And I mean, it's pretty shocking what will happen, what could happen there, and people aren't even cognizant of how that spreads from there. So any kind of collaboration, anything, information that adds more emphasis and PR in it would be quite beneficial.
Well, it speaks to a fundamental issue, and that is a lack of land use authority that counties have. But where there is no authority, we have been working with our ESDs, and ESD2 actually put a mitigation plan together and has been seeking grants to address them. But at the end of the day, the things that we have been able to do have been done on a voluntary basis, not with the force of law. But we do have a process that has been helpful.
Don't worry, the de-annexation laws don't affect any of your stuff over there, so you're good.
You still need Jesus.
Okay, on that note, We're going to reel it back to Ashby. Anything else?
So we have been working on, in coordination with the TxDOT Austin District, on setting up the foundations for a regional traffic management center. We continue to work with TxDOT and the local governments on that, and so we will continue to advance that this year, and that also is tied closely to the presentation you just saw on Smart Track, so we've intentionally tried to weave those things together as we move forward. So with that, I'll just stop, Madam Chair.
No, thank you for that update. And just thanks again to staff. The reports that we all got today represents a lot of time and effort on their part, and just even literally setting up for this meeting, they do that. So thanks to all of you who work hard to make this meeting run smoothly. We really appreciate it. And to follow on with Mayor Houston's comment, we will not have a March meeting. Our next meeting will be April the 14th at 2. The next TAC meeting will be February 24th at 2. And for the newer members, Ashby will be reaching out to you, if he hasn't already, to give you the CAMPO 101. And don't worry, because the test that he has afterwards is it's pretty easy. It's only 150 questions, an essay version, but yeah, the acronym test is fun. So thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day. And at 3:23, we stand adjourned.
Could have said happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, and sorry, and happy Valentine's Day. Okay, you totally.